follow your every whim.
But you don't believe in any of it.
And still I follow. Because all that matters is that you are safe.
But that's not all that matters. Who's keeping you safe?
I do not need you to protect me.
Just a few days ago, we got a look at the massive news regarding the monstrous file size of God of War Ragnarok on the PlayStation 4. According to industry insider Joe Miller, the game will be just north of 90 gigs on the PS4 version, and he expects the file size to be quote-unquote a bit smaller on the PS5. Now, this is huge info that goes to show just how much larger this game's file size is in comparison to the previous game, colloquially referred to as God of War 2018 or God of War 4. God of War 2018 debuted with a file size of 44.44 gigabytes, and this was all pre-patches and the further New Game Plus update. Now, God of War 2018 was indeed a very large game that took players on a 15 to 20 hour campaign, but add on the side and endgame content, the game about doubled in length. With God of War Ragnarok expected to launch at around the 90 gigabyte mark on the PS4, we can expect a much bigger game this time around. For some added perspective here, let's go ahead and compare God of War Ragnarok's PS4 file size to that of some of the largest single-player games on the PS4. The Witcher 3 debuted with 50 gigabytes. Will God of War Ragnarok be as large and expansive as The Witcher 3? Well, probably not, but it's an interesting comparison nonetheless. We've got The Last of Us Part 2 sitting at 80 gigs, a long, exceptionally detailed linear story-driven game that falls short of God of War Ragnarok on PS4 in file size. Ghost of Tsushima, a massive open-world game, sat at 50 gigs when it launched. Even the mighty GTA 5 launched at a whopping 76 gigs. Red Dead Redemption 2 is the only single-player game I know of on the PS4 that has a file size larger than God of War Ragnarok's 90 gigs, weighing in at 105 gigabytes. Now, this isn't meant to be a weigh-in for some big fight in Vegas. Rather, this is meant to get some perspective and insight as to how massive a game God of War Ragnarok will likely be when it launches. With all 9 realms to explore, and with so many events likely to take place during the events of Ragnarok, there's a reason for the massive file size here. And such a Herculean file size for a God of War game calls for some sort of list about all the awesome things we are about to experience, right? Join me as we take another dive into God of War Ragnarok and look at how the monolithic file size of the game can make awesome new impacts to these 5 areas of the game.
Fate only binds you if you let it. Do what is necessary.
Coming in hot at number 5 is without a doubt the boss fights.
We will make our own destiny.
It isn't a proper God of War game if it doesn't have over-the-top, violent displays of god-slaying goodness now, does it? Just like the very first God of War back in 2005, God of War 2018 shares some similar DNA in that these games didn't have many major boss fights in the game. Just as God of War 2 was to the original by lengthening the game considerably and adding more over-the-top boss encounters, God of War Ragnarok will most definitely contain many more main boss fights than the previous game did. Going alone by the tone of this story and that its setting is indeed Ragnarok, also known as the end of the world, you'd think that there will be an increased focus on boss fights in God of War Ragnarok, right? With so many gods and figures in Norse mythology left unaccounted for so far for Kratos and Atreus, it only makes sense that Kratos and company won't see eye to eye with many of them. The hefty 90 gigabyte file size definitely has at least a few gigs in there dedicated to these epic fights that lie in store for us. So far, it is confirmed we will definitely go head to head with Thor and some Valkyries, but what additional boss fights do you think we'll see in God of War Ragnarok? Let me know in the comments, good people. Strutting in at number 4, the expanded combat. Designing intricate, complex battle systems definitely require some space on the hard drive to compute all the combat nuances and how they interact with the environment. In God of War Ragnarok, we can expect to see continued use of the Blades of Chaos and the Leviathan Axe, along with the additional movesets they've received thanks to the Game Informer footage, including the weapon signature moves, adding extra elemental damage to the currently equipped weapon. I have speculated in previous videos that we are probably not going to be just limited to these two weapons. Rather, we will most likely gain access to some awesome new weapons throughout the 9 realms, including what I believe to be Thor's hammer, the Mjolnir. We also have confirmation of the 2 new shield types in the parry-favored Dauntless Shield and the tank-like Stonewall Shield being added to the game to give greater importance to the shield this time around. Other new combat features are likely to be quite plentiful, and expect huge reveals when the game launches. As combat is a major part of the God of War franchise, expect some awesome expansion on the series' combat in Ragnarok. Going all the way to third base... Whoops. Yeah, let's take it from the top. Coming in at number 3 is without a doubt the expanded game world. I mean, obviously, the game is going to be significantly larger than the previous God of War game, right? In God of War Ragnarok, we have access to all 9 realms this time around instead of God of War 2018's 6 realms. And even then, some of those realms in the previous game, namely Muspelheim and Niflheim, were quite small. In God of War Ragnarok, expect to see all 9 realms fully fleshed out with incredible variety and depth to them, similar to what we got in Midgard and Alfheim in the previous game. Well, now that I think about it, Midgard was a lot more significant, but the point still stands. With all 9 realms playing key roles in the story this time, expect a great bulk of the hefty 90 gigabytes being due to the sheer size of the game world to be far larger than the previous game. In at number 2 goes along with the previous one, and that is an expanded assortment of side content and endgame content. God of War 2018 introduced side quests as something brand new to the God of War formula, and one that was met with much praise as it provided meaningful incentives to explore more of the game's nooks and crannies while rewarding the player with some awesome loot in the process. We can absolutely expect this to return in God of War Ragnarok, as this content, along with the endgame content with the Valkyrie hunting and armor set farming, contributed to an additional 20 plus hours to the game's length. Even if God of War Ragnarok's story comes in at around 40 hours, expect a great deal of side content and endgame content to extend the game's runtime way past that mark. Let's just hope that the endgame content is more varied in God of War Ragnarok this time around. You can hear more of my thoughts about how God of War Ragnarok can improve upon the previous game's side content and endgame by viewing this card here. And finally, at number 1, we have the game's visual fidelity with the fantastic graphics. It's no doubt that graphical fidelity is a major reason why so many games have incredibly high file sizes. Just look at Red Dead Redemption 2, and also take a good look at The Last of Us Part 2, a game that is pretty sizable for its campaign, but the insane attention to detail all throughout that game propelled that game's install size to a whopping 80 gigs. God of War 2018 was known in a similar light, in that its more open-ended game design and world layout, in addition to its incredible attention to detail and graphical prowess, made it one of the best-looking games in 2018. Using the same engine as the previous game, we can expect that kind of excellence here in God of War Ragnarok, but with even more embellishments that will make this game look even better. God of War 2018's development was crazy, in that much of the design of that game, as we know right now, was the product of a couple of years of development after having completed the game's engine and establishing how they wanted the game to be. With 4.5 years of development put into God of War Ragnarok, expect to see even more progress with the game's graphics, as the team already has all the knowledge and experience with developing with the engine. Expect amazing visuals, vast vistas, combat with more bite, and so much more with the game's visuals. If God of War 2018 was a trial run for the developers, then we can expect God of War Ragnarok to take us to new heights we've never seen before in the franchise. God of War Ragnarok will, without a doubt, have some of the meatiest and most delicious gigabytes ever to be put into our consoles.
Do what is necessary. Not because it is written.
And that about does it with my video on God of War Ragnarok's insane file size and the effects it has on the rest of the game. We've often seen the PS5 versions of their PS4 counterparts to be roughly in the same ballpark of each other. So if indeed the PS5 version of God of War Ragnarok were to be a lower file size, I wouldn't expect it to be significantly lower. In all, a larger file size for God of War Ragnarok is directly in line with what many of us have been saying. God of War Ragnarok is going to be the biggest game in the franchise, and will be an absolute monster of a game. Thank you, good people, for making it all the way to the end of the video. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and go on to subscribe to the channel if you loved it. Let me know in the comments what you would include to this list and what's contributing to that massive file size as well. I will be making much more God of War Ragnarok content as we get closer to the game's release, so make sure to hit that bell notification as soon as I upload a new video. Also, take a look at that massive God of War Ragnarok playlist I've made, going over many other areas to look forward to in the game. Thank you all for the incredible support you've shown the channel recently, and as always, take care and I will see you in the next video. Peace!